Hi there. I bet you clicked on this video because you're interested in China. I was born and raised in China. I've been living overseas for more than 8 years, and I want to talk about opinions on China. So let me start with a question. Think about some media that you know, maybe Fox News or BBC. Think about the political spectrum in the US, left versus right, or in whichever country you're from. My question is, do you believe those media are biased politically? Maybe not all of them, but I bet you believe like some of them are biased, especially among those that you tend to disagree with. So, what about China? Given that you know media can be biased politically, do you think they can be biased against China? I mean, it's okay if you say no, but I hope it doesn't come off that unreasonable when I say I think Western medias are, or they certainly can be biased against China in a similar way, for similar reasons, for whatever reason you find the media in your country can be politically biased. Except in your own country, it might be like left versus right, but for China, it's more like China versus everyone else. And you can't really read Chinese, so you only get access to one side of the story. That's kind of a problem. Uh, I think the best feature of freedom of speech is the competition of idea in the public discourse. It's kind of like free market, but for ideas. We'll come back to how this lack of freedom of speech affect Chinese people like me later. For now, I want to talk about how everyone only getting one side of a story can hinder public discourse. I'm certainly not here to convince you that you're on the wrong side to be on. I probably agree with you on a lot of the issues, by the way. The thing is, people can be on the right side for the wrong reasons. Let me give you my personal story. When I grew up, I was taught in school that the earth is round and evolution is how humans come to be. Yes, we teach that in China. But I didn't really pay attention in class because school is kind of boring. So I never really learned for myself why that's true exactly until I met someone who believed otherwise, and we had an argument. So I kind of had to fill in the gaps with a vague memory and making a bunch of mistakes actually, and I had to go back and look it up on the internet and relearn exactly why that's true, so I can win an internet argument. I believe the same thing can happen when someone criticizes China but they don't really know about China that much and base their argument on misconceptions or blow things out of proportion or just they remember things wrong. And then someone who's actually from China who knows better will get all triggered and salty about it and try to start an online argument. I've certainly got frustrated enough to have done it. It was a pleasant surprise for me when I discovered YouTubers like Serpent and Lova86. They are foreigners who live in China and they talk about China from their viewpoint in English. Apart from how they film on actual Chinese streets, which is really nostalgic for me because at the point I was like a couple years living abroad. Uh, when it comes to China, they really know what they're talking about because they have lived in China for many years. And they speak Chinese, so they can talk to Chinese people. And talk about both positives and negatives of China. When I talk about negatives, it actually really makes sense to me because it's always something that I've either personally experienced or it's something I can definitely see happening in China. I've heard of them. That kind of thing. Although they have both since moved out of China, there are many other YouTubers currently living in China making this type of content right now. So if you're interested, you should go and just look it up. Nathan Rich is a very interesting case among Chinese YouTubers. YouTubers who live in China because he pretty much only makes pro-China content. And from the way he talks, you can pretty much tell that he's really eager to be an apologist for China. And I use that word intentionally, the word apologist. I couldn't help but notice the choice of words in his Chinese subtitles are pretty spicy. So basically, he's one of the few accessible sources to the English-speaking world that's biased in favor of China. That's actually like sophisticated enough, rather than just some stupid government propaganda that's just awkward and cringy. The word is cringy. Okay. So, anyways, if you're one of those guys who want both sides of the argument, I'll recommend you to subscribe to him and have a look. These YouTubers are definitely a useful source of information on China. I want to talk about the negatives of them as well. First of all, a lot of foreigners, including Winston and Seamilk, they enter China as English teachers. Nathan worked in technology. I think he used to be a programmer, technology. So while they might be experts when it comes to China, they probably aren't experts in things like economics, philosophy, or history of China. So when they say something, you should really think about this. Is this something that they have seen and lived through themselves? Or is this something they just read from the news or heard from a friend? Another thing you should think about when you see a YouTuber is what kind of audience do they have? What kind of audience does their content appeal to? I guess this is similar to traditional media, since a YouTube channel can definitely become a business. Basically, many YouTubers focus their efforts on producing content that appeals to a certain audience, so they can build up a subscriber base over time, and in turn, they're kind of incentivized to self-censor to better appeal to their audience and get more views and grow their business. Now, one thing to note here is some channels upload their content to both YouTube and this Chinese video streaming platform called Bilibili. So even though you can see a lot of those Chinese people here on YouTube, their content might still be made with them in mind. One telltale sign of this is the embedded Chinese subtitles. So let's talk about these Chinese people, myself included. Let me tell you a story. So when I was back in university in Canada, I had this English tutor who's a grad student paid by the university to do some open sessions with international students like myself. He's also kind of like a friend of mine, by the way. Anyways, so there's this one time he asked me about this girl who's also Chinese but really hated the Chinese government, and he asked me, "How do you feel about someone like that?" My answer at the time was, well, I think some of the things she said I can agree with, but I don't like her. I think maybe it's kind of like sports, I said, where I'm fan of Team China, but he's kind of booing my team. Team China. Over all these years living in not China, I've met and talked to many other Chinese people, and it turns out I definitely wasn't alone in thinking that way. You might think the exposure to Western culture and free press would change someone. Well, I certainly changed after a couple of years, but people might choose to not even engage with those things at all. After all, we can still access those media we are accustomed to back in China and those things. And there's usually enough Chinese people in a given place for them to kind of form their small circles. So when you talk to someone from China, this should definitely be on your mind. Are they like past me who's for Team China, or are they like the girl in this example who's against Team China? This is not a boys versus girls thing, by the way. In addition to that, like YouTubers, we are no experts in stuff. I'm certainly limited by my experience. I'm from Beijing, and China is a pretty big place. And I'm probably also limited by my gender and my social class. And if I'm making a living out of talking about China, maybe I'll take my time and do some research and try to get the full picture, but I'm not. So in summary, people like me are not an unbiased source of information on China, but compared to foreign YouTubers, we have a lot more experience living in China. We view things from a different viewpoint, and there's a lot more of us, so you have a better chance of finding someone who's an expert in politics or whatever issue you really care about. There are things we'll never experience, though. For example, like living in China as a foreigner, which you might care if you want to do that one day. In the end, the reason you can't get unbiased information in China is because if you don't speak Chinese, you have to get it through someone else who has to be somehow founded or at least motivated to do the research and learn it and present it to you somehow. But that will probably affect their opinion. Now at this point, maybe you're expecting me to give you some advice. So here you go. Advice number one, you can try to assemble a bunch of sources with a variety of different biases to try to get to something neutral. Advice number two is you can go through some academic papers and just research and learn them by yourself. And advice number three is you can learn Chinese, and so you no longer need a middleman. Now, maybe you're going, okay, dude, that's cool, but none of this advice is practical for me. I don't have that kind of time to spend. Okay, because you sat through this whole video, let me tell you my secret. The thing I actually do. Okay? I do whatever amount of research I feel like. And then I go, okay, so I have done this amount of research and I have this amount of experience about the subject. I want you to really pay attention right now because this is my secret that solves the problem in no time at all. I lower my confidence accordingly. And what that means in practice is when someone asks my opinions on the China-related issue and if it's something I'm not so sure about, I just admit that. I say, I'm not so sure about it. And I still say whatever I think. It's not just, I don't know. And there you go. But I also say where I got those ideas from. If I heard from a friend, that's what I'll say. If I read it on the internet, that's what I'll say. So they have the freedom to decide how they want to treat that information. And being uncertain about something doesn't mean I can't act upon what I believe. I just stop acting. I consider what if I'm wrong and balance that against how confident I am and whether it's worth the time to do more research. So I can just choose to either take action, do more research, or just move on to something else and just leave it. And now I've said it out loud, it kind of sounds like common sense. So. Anyway, this is pretty much it. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it helps. I wanted to leave my personal opinions out of this video since that's not what this is about. But if you want to know my take on a certain China-related issue, ask them in the comments and I'll answer them. I'll even make a list if there's like a frequently asked question and put it in the pinned comments if I get a lot of repeated questions. Probably won't since nobody watches my video. Bye.